Welcome to another broadcast of the Debra Rufini Show on the ArtistFirst Radio Network. All past shows are archived. You can find them at ArtistFirst.com. And now, from England, here she is, your host, Debra Rufini.
Greetings from the UK. I'm Debra Rufini, and today I have the pleasure of speaking with Chris Pluck, Deputy Director of Samaritans, an organisation here in the UK which is a listening ear for those in despair or feeling suicidal. Good to have you on the show, Chris.
Lovely to be here. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very fit, thank you.
Oh, well, should I be asking? You should be asking me how I am.
I should, shouldn't I? Yes, indeed. Right.
So, tell us a bit about Samaritans, what you do.
Well, Samaritans, if I can give you a bit of a background history
Sure.
on what went on.
Yep.
It was an organisation that started about 70 years ago,
Oh, wow.
thereabouts.
Quite a long time.
And the name of the person who started it was a chap called Chad Vara.
Yeah.
A rather unusual name, but he was an Anglican vicar.
Right.
And at that time, in the 1950s, he was somewhat surprised by the number of people who were not able to express themselves openly.
Right.
There was a rather repressive culture at that time, and what he was interested in was to provide some sort of sex education for young people and couples.
Okay.
And he supported gay and lesbian people. And that time, of course, it was a crime to be homosexual.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah.
His first duty, really, as a priest, was to bury a 14-year-old girl.
Oh, my goodness.
The reason behind that and how that came about was that she'd started her periods, but having no one to talk to, she believed that she had a sexually transmitted disease and took her own life.
How awful. Yeah.
And really, that was the start of how the Samaritans began. That really sowed the seeds, if you like.
Yes.
And that was really what Chad thought about. There should be people there that others could talk to.
Absolutely.
And no matter how awful you believed your problem to be, there should be somebody there to try and unburden yourself.
Yeah, sure.
And at that time, there was something like 3 suicides a day in Greater London.
That's quite high.
So it is high, isn't it?
That's
it really
very high.
is something. So thinking, if you like, to use that awful expression, outside the box, what he decided to do was to establish a phone line number, if you like, for people to call in. And because of his connections, publicity took off. He was able to circulate the idea quite freely.
Yeah.
And instead of using 999, which is the emergency line number in this country,
Yes.
he wanted a dedicated number that could be used for people who could call in and find help and comfort and support for all the crises that they were going through. Going back a little bit, I must say the first thing that he wanted to do, he was based, by the way, at St Stephen's, Walbrook. That was his church.
Right.
Just a bit of background there. It was a church that was destroyed in the Great Fire of London. It was rebuilt by Sir Christopher Wren.
Yes.
And I'm led to believe that it's got a huge altar stone at its centre. That was designed by Henry Moore, in fact. So that little bit of background about that.
Yeah.
But the idea was that people could come to him and talk to him about all the crises and problems that they were experiencing.
Okay.
Now, because there were so many people that came, others within the community were making teas and coffees,
Oh, right. Yeah.
to give them general support. But what he did notice, those who were making teas and coffees were actually talking to these people who had come in
Right.
to find support and comfort. And that was how, really, the idea came to him that it wasn't necessarily him who could deal with the problem, but ordinary people
Yeah, sure.
who could give time and devote some time to just listen to people. And that is really how it all came about. And I suppose the first helpline that he used, which actually was MAN 9000, because he's right next door to the Mansion House, was started on the 1st or 2nd of November 1953. And that's really how it sort of took off in that direction. But it was ordinary people who were prepared to give the time just to sit there and listen. And so it blossomed from there, and the idea spread around. From 1963 onwards. There were 41 Samaritan centres or branches across the UK and Ireland, and now, this day, there are 201.
That's quite a few.
Spread throughout the UK, including the Republic of Ireland as well. And did it go abroad? Yes, it did.
Yeah.
He travelled abroad. He went to Moscow. He went to the United States, I believe, as well. Yeah. And although it's not termed Samaritans, it's known as the Befrienders worldwide. So it's a similar type of network.
Yes.
But the word or the term Samaritans wasn't something that he'd used. This was adopted by the media.
Oh, okay.
And it was really to do with the parable of the Good Samaritan. That's how they picked it up, and the name stuck. And so, although it's not a religious organisation as such, the word Samaritans stuck, and that's how we go from there.
Wow. That's brilliant. And also, I guess it's important, isn't it, to get people, volunteers that have had experience of everyday life, because we all have different things. You know, you can have the most qualified person in the world, but you know, maybe the person on the street could understand more what's going on with stuff.
I think it's fair to say that we're not experts by any means. We come from a range of different backgrounds.
Oh, right, yeah.
Huge cross-section of the community. And as I say, we're not experts, but we do have time to sit and listen.
And the most important thing.
And that is what it's all about. And I mean, you know as well as I do that if you're in a conversation with a friend, you hate the silence. You've got to fill that gap.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
And you're always there if there's a problem, saying, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that?
Yeah.
We don't do that. We don't offer advice. We offer support, certainly. And we're not judgmental. And
that's very important.
It is,
because that goes far, doesn't it? I mean, it's a horrible feeling when even just sat down speaking to a friend, and if someone says, well, haven't you thought about this, or why don't you do this, or why don't you, to actually, be an ear.
That's right, and you start to impose your ideas onto somebody else, and, you know, to be quite blunt, you don't know their circumstances, you don't know their background and all the situations that they find themselves in.
Yeah.
So that's the main problem, to try and keep as open-minded as possible. So don't be judgmental, and certainly any prejudices that you might have, leave at the gate, you know, don't take those any further.
Do you find that hard as a volunteer, if you feel strongly about something and someone calls, or you speak to someone and we're all human?
Well, that's absolutely right. We are human, and that there are prejudices which we all have, and there's no getting away from it, but what you must do is to not give any hint of that at all.
Yeah. Leave
it behind. And it is hard at times, but, you know,
yes, but it is.
That's one of the things that, you know, we're told to do. Yeah. And that is right, you know, and it provides people with a greater degree of freedom to express their problems.
Yes.
And I suppose, having touched on that briefly, it's the training that we receive, which is absolutely superb. Yeah. It's a long course, and you've got to be really quite dedicated. We have two sections of training. Samaritans Initial Training 1 is what it's called. That's the first part, and it consists of some 10 modules or so, once a week, regularly, and attendance on each of those is absolutely necessary to get a continuum going.
Yes.
Then the new volunteer becomes a new Samaritan, as they're called. Then there's a period of practice, if you like, online, where they're taking live calls with a mentor, so they're supported all the time. And then we move on to SIT 2 training, Samaritans Initial Training 2, would you believe?
Oh, right, yeah.
And that is just once a month. Each of these modules is 3 hours a time, so there's a long period there. Once that is completed, the probationer, Samaritan as they're now called, after 6 months has an interview with either the director or the deputy director, and then becomes a fully fledged Samaritan. But it's because we're dealing with such a variety of calls, and I can talk more about that a little later, the level of support for us needs to be really very thorough, and it is.
Yeah, sure.
So when you're in a centre taking calls, you're never working alone. You always have a co-volunteer with you.
Yeah.
And although you're separated from each other so that you can take the calls and have your independence, as it were, we do discuss the calls afterwards. And although it is, and I stress this, a confidential service,
yes,
what we hear on the line or from any other sources remains confidential within the Samaritans.
That's very important.
And that is terribly important. That's the cornerstone to our organisation. It really is.
That's brilliant.
But sharing between a co-volunteer what you have experienced or heard on the phone, if you like, diffuses anything that is causing upset within you.
Yes.
And at the end of your shift, you automatically then speak to a leader who is another volunteer, and they are at home or on a mobile phone, and you talk through the calls and the other forms of contact that you've had. So theoretically, at the end of your 2-3 hour shift, or whatever it might be, 4-hour shift, you feel that you've been unburdened, if you like, of what you've experienced.
Yeah.
Try and leave everything behind.
Yes.
Easier said than done. Because, they are human, and obviously if you drive home or walk home or whatever, what you've experienced and the calls that you've received remain with you.
Yeah. Yes, the bounce on.
That's right. And, we do get some distressing calls. You still have an opportunity, once you're at home, to phone the leader again and say, look, this is not settling with me. Can I just talk this through to unburden myself still more?
Yeah.
I think over a period of time, you don't get blasé about it, and you don't become, if you like, hung up about it. I think you learn to live with it, and it's this huge network of support that you've got.
That's
really
very
carries
important.
You through. It is.
Yeah.
It is.
Because you're hearing, I would imagine, various things, so many things, and there may be more than one thing that may stay in your mind for a few days, and then you do another shift possibly, and then there's something else, and to have continuous support must be vital.
Yeah, it is, and not only support, but retraining. I mean, every year, all the Samaritans undergo retraining, no matter how long you've been in the organisation. So your skills are kept up to date. Any changes in procedures are updated and amended and so on. So you're constantly, on the front end, if you like, of the whole process. The calls themselves, well, yes, that is our main point of contact, that is true. But of course, we do have other ways in which callers can come to us. We have what is called face-to-face, which means that people can come off the street and talk to us without an appointment. And we have several of those.
Yeah.
So within most of the branches, that facility is there. We also have emails that come in, and not only from this country, but from abroad. We get quite a lot from the United States.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Yes, quite a few. We can pick that up, obviously, from the slight change in language or terminology that's used.
Yeah, sure.
So that's another way in which we can have contact, and the other one is by text message. There's a dedicated line for that as well.
That's important for someone who may not want to actually speak or emailing you. It's good that they're maybe a bit nervous about.
Yes, you're absolutely right. Because coming back to basics, to make that call to the Samaritans, to pick up the phone, make the call, talk to somebody who is completely anonymous. Yeah. Takes huge amounts of courage.
It does, doesn't it? Yeah.
Massive amounts of courage. And I think that's something that, quite often we forget, that when the phone goes, there might be somebody who is absolutely terrified of speaking.
Yes.
And several times you'll pick the phone up, it sounds as though there's nobody there at all.
All right.
And it may well be that somebody is trying to compose themselves.
Yeah.
To actually start to talk.
Yeah.
And so if there's an open line, if you like, and no response on the other end, we certainly don't put the phone down straight away.
Oh, that's good.
We will say, we are here, just take your time, I'll wait as long as you like.
Oh, wonderful.
And so every opportunity is given. But it takes huge amounts of courage
to
make that initial call. It really does.
Do you ever get any callers, if they are maybe nervous and don't know how to go straight into what they're calling about, they may make nervous talk or chit-chat or talk about something else before they get round to the point?
Yes.
Do.
I think it's like any conversation that any adult would have face-to-face. You know, you have a point that you want to discuss or a situation that you want to unburden yourself with.
Yeah.
And you work around it, don't you?
Yes.
A few pleasantries to start with, and then, you know, you begin to move to the centre of the argument or the problem that's really on their mind.
Yeah.
So you might start the conversation with something which is relatively trivial, but all of a sudden you find yourself moving towards that target. But having said that, I mean, the majority of people are distressed enough to go straight to that. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
I can imagine, you know, the whole service is people who are in distress and maybe suicidal. Sometimes when we don't know how to deal with our own emotions, it's easier to blast at anyone else. Do you ever have calls of that nature where it's quite angry and you know that there's something?
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if people have been upset by something, there's something devastating happened in their life, they are angry. There's no other word for it. And so we are trained, part of our course is dealing with people like that, and essentially what we do is to let them, you know, deliver what they want to. And quite often you find after a while the pace comes down, the pressure is released, and, you know, again, all we do is to sit and listen and allow them to take their time. And what you find 9 times out of 10 certainly is that people will come down.
You find that
they will climb down, and you will be able to explore their situation in far more detail. But having said that, it's the waiting process, which I think, you know, people on the street maybe would become frustrated about and say, look, come on, get to grips, you know, what's the problem? Here we are, you know.
I guess with the training behind you, you kind of understand maybe how you know, how people operate in times when they just don't know how to channel their anger.
But I mean, going to the heart of our organisation, I suppose, the vision of the Samaritans is that there should be fewer people who die by suicide. Now, there are other aspects I can talk about in just a moment, but the wording there is quite important. We are not saying we're there to stop suicides. And I think that is the point that a lot of people tend to think out on the street, that that's what we're there for, to stop suicides. It is our mission to have fewer people die by suicide. And this perhaps doesn't sit very comfortably with some people, because one of our lines that we take is self-determination. So that, going to an extreme case, if you have somebody on the other end of the line who is in the process of taking their own life, and that does happen,
at that moment,
you can be talking to somebody who is in the process of taking their life. They might have cut their wrists or taken an overdose, or are going to hang themselves. You are there to support them. You are there to be alongside them.
That's brilliant.
Now, we do, of course, err on the side of life, and that if anybody finds themselves in a situation like that, we do ask them, now, are you sure you don't want any assistance?
It's a massive decision to take.
It is a huge decision.
Biggest decision.
and that is what we would say. Are you quite sure that you don't want any assistance? No, might be the response, and you can't do anything about that. And so there are occasions, and it is, you know, absolutely devastating when it happens, that you are there as somebody dies. And that does sit with you for a while.
Naturally.
You know, as you can imagine. But having said that, coming back to the erring on the side of life, we do offer them a way out, if that is the case, to turn that round, that situation. And the way we would do that, if the caller decides that no, they don't want to take their life, if they've taken an overdose or cut their wrist, what we would ask them is for their contact details, their location. Right. We would say to them, first of all, are you capable of calling an ambulance yourself?
Yes.
If they are, then that is what we would encourage them to do.
Yeah.
If they are incapable, and that does happen, providing we've got all their details and their location, their precise location,
yes,
we, with their blessing, will contact the ambulance service.
Oh, that's good.
And we will stay on the line with them until the ambulance service arrives. So, you know, there is that safety net if they require it. But if they don't, then, as I said before, you know, self-determination is what we must adhere to. And that's a hard call.
Yes, yeah, sure. I often find it very sad when someone attempts suicide, and it's not a cry for attention. They really do just want, they've had enough, there's nowhere else to turn, they just feel they've had enough of life. And I think sometimes people around them, even you know, their loved ones, can still kind of say, what were you thinking of?
Yes.
You know, that's really selfish.
Yes. Yes.
You know, sort of the person's feeling rough enough as it is.
Absolutely.
And then on top of that, it's like, well, you'd be leaving us behind. You'd be, and you think, well, you can sort of understand.
Of course.
That's it, but at the same time, they're not thinking of that person. That you know, the mind frame must be not A1 at the time, and it makes, if they're feeling bad enough, they must be feeling far more guilty, actually, I guess, maybe.
Well,
sometimes.
I think to an outsider, yes, that is absolutely true, and everything you said there, I certainly agree with. But I think if you try and put yourself in the position of the person who just cannot see any way out, it's rather like being in a blinkered situation. You're totally oblivious to everything that is going on around you. This is your one goal. You want to end your life.
Yeah.
And yes, it is absolutely devastating for people close to them, friends, family, you name it. And I suppose if I can just draw on that a little bit more, one of our other aspects that we deal with, we have an outreach programme within each of the branches. And in the Portsmouth branch that I belong to, we have a great partnership with Network Rail.
Right.
And within our particular patch, we have 17 stations to look after.
Oh, great, that's good.
If there's an incident, we are asked to go out and show a presence on the station, not then and there necessarily, but within 24 hours, 48 hours, and talk to people who have actually either witnessed this or have been disturbed by what has gone on, and we will talk to them, certainly. It's all right, rather like a sort of face-to-face situation in the outside the branch.
Sure.
And quite often when we're doing this, people will come up to us and say, isn't it awful when somebody jumps out in front of a train? Look at the effect it must have on the driver, on those who've witnessed it, on the timetable itself, how much disruption is caused, and the huge cost that it involves, not only in clearing up after an incident, which is pretty formidable, but also the knock-on effect for late arrivals and you name it.
Yes.
And I think the important thing there is to realise, and they're right up to a point, that it is the person in that situation who is totally oblivious to everything else that is going on.
Yes, yeah.
And it does have an awful effect on the driver of the train, and a lot of drivers certainly don't continue in that particular line within in that particular organisation, and it is dreadful for them, certainly. But for somebody who is determined to take their own life, that is the only way out.
Yes. Yeah, and they're not thinking about, I'm going to do this and cause all this mess because I just want to be annoying. The mind frame.
Yes.
Can't be thinking.
It is extraordinary, and I think a lot of people, do find that quite difficult to understand and comprehend. It is the immediate effect that it's had, and the knock-on effect more than anything else.
Yes.
And it is difficult to get into the mind of the person who sees absolutely no way out at all. People jumping from bridges, throwing themselves in front of trains, walking down into the sea and drowning. There are all sorts of things that go on in this particular region.
Yeah.
Fortunately, they are few and far between. But having said that, I mean, that is a partnership that we have with Network Rail, and there are other partnerships that we have also. One of our recent initiatives is a partnership with what we call Veterans Outreach Support.
All right.
Now, this is really to give the armed services support once people come out of the armed services. Perhaps there isn't that level of support that should be there. I'm not here to criticise, you understand, but we are there with other agencies to try and give support. And this is an initiative we do once a month in Portsmouth, certainly, as well. Schools, we go into schools as well.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And that's
a lot of children.
Absolutely.
Children,
yes. I mean, you're not pushing the suicidal aspect, but it's more the well-being, discussing problems, not bottling things up, being prepared to discuss any problems with either their peers or adults or family, teachers, whatever. And I mean, it is so easy to bottle things up and think, well, I'll deal with them, I'm sure.
And feel that sometimes crying is a form of weakness or just hold everything in because what might my friend think.
That's absolutely right. And I think it's interesting to note, you touched on a rather sensitive point maybe, that I think women in general are more open in their discussions.
Yeah.
And it comes out in all our statistics that in fact women will discuss any problems that they have.
Yes.
On all sorts of different levels, far more than men do.
Right.
Men tend to bottle things up.
Yeah.
And as you say, it may be seen as a weakness to cry. And in the male population, maybe we don't do that often enough, or as often as we should.
Yes.
Because it's a way of releasing all that tension and anxiety and depression or whatever it might be. But having said that, we males tend to sort of bottle things far more, I think.
It's a shame. I often feel sorry for guys. I'm often glad that I'm not a guy in that respect because I'm a real blubber and,
Not a bad thing.
Sometimes when you cry, you just can't stop and you just want to keep crying and I often think that it must be hard for men that feel there's a pressure that, nope, I've got to be a man, I've got to be strong about this, I can't show my emotion and that must be very difficult.
It is, and I think having said that, when we're doing outreach, when we're standing on stations, when we're in the community, if you like, showing a presence, it is to everybody that we speak. And hopefully, although they don't need our services, taking one of our cards with the free phone number on it,
so they always have that.
They will have that in their back pocket or in their wallet or whatever.
Yes.
But interesting enough, having said that, there are quite a number of occasions you're handing out those cards, people say, oh, I'm fine, I don't need one of those.
Right.
And I sometimes say to them, well, maybe you don't, but perhaps a friend of yours might.
Yes, absolutely.
And you might just have that number at the right time for them.
Yeah. So, a card can go a long way.
Oh, it can. It can.
It's picked up a lot later. You can
that's right. What's that in the back of my wallet? Oh, yes. There's the number on there and the contact and the website and all the rest of it. So we go from there.
So age-wise, your callers and visitors vary massively?
Right across the board, we have children.
Oh, do you? Yeah.
Right up to those who are well in retirement, shall we say. And I suppose there's a fairly even distribution. I suppose the most distressing is, of course, a call from a child.
Yes.
And again, we have a partnership with Childline.
Oh, good.
So we work with them, and a child is a vulnerable person.
Yes, yeah.
And therefore, if the particular situation arises, we would either suggest to them, have you phone Childline, who are a dedicated line for children, as the name would suggest.
Yeah.
And this is not passing them down the line by any means. We're still there to support them all the time.
Yeah.
But they would perhaps take the matter further. Now, of course, once it's in the hand of Childline, if there is a case that needs to be addressed,
yes,
the confidentiality, you understand, is no longer there. It may have to disappear
sure,
in order to come to that child's aid and assistance. And that is something that is made absolutely clear. If the child doesn't wish to go along that line, and again, it is the child who would make contact with Childline, we do not do that on their behalf.
Yes.
Because it is a form of self-determination. They need to have ownership of the situation.
Sure.
That is important.
Yeah.
And should they wish to avail themselves of their services, then that is their choice. But we're still there in the background for them should they need to come back to us.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But it's, I mean, talking of partnerships and that sort of thing, I suppose you could say, well, it's a form of signposting in a way. You're pointing somebody in a particular direction. And that we do also. I'll give you an example. If somebody, for instance, phones with a financial problem,
yes,
and it is financial, and we've explored it thoroughly, and it still comes down to finance, then really they do need that particular form of financial assistance and help. And having said that, we have a series of agencies, other charities who specialise in these particular areas that we can signpost the caller to.
All right.
And again, it's up to them whether they avail themselves of that service or not. And quite often they say, well, that's just what we're looking for.
Oh, right, yeah.
And so problem solved. But at the same time, you always explore their emotional well-being. How are you in all of this? You know, how has this affected you? Is there anything else you want to talk about? So you're not just saying, well, here's the card, off you go, good luck and farewell. It's a little bit more than that. You always ask, what about their well-being and their emotional state?
Yeah, well, that's good. It's do you every call that you have, if there was a caller that say was making out everything was okay and they just want to share with you about having a lovely day, or and you may feel that there's an alternative reason for the call. Do you have to ask about their well-being if they're feeling suicidal? Or?
Well, there are two sides to that, really. Quite often, with calls in the middle of the night, you may get somebody who sort of wakes up. They've had a nightmare, they can't get back to sleep, or they can't sleep, and they just want somebody to talk to. They might be in complete isolation, living on their own, in circumstances that we know nothing about, obviously, but feeling lonely. And people do phone in, look, I can't sleep. Can I just talk to you for a few moments? Absolutely fine.
Yeah. That's good.
So, you know, we do offer that. We're not going to put the phone down and say, well, we're not here as a chat line, end of story.
Yeah.
Certainly we will allow them to talk, and quite often during the course of the conversation you might find one or two aspects to explore. On the other hand, the other point that you made, yes, if somebody starts off in a chatty way, the training does allow you to explore, and that is certainly what we do.
Yeah.
And again, it comes back to a point that you made earlier on, that quite often it does take some time for that caller to get to the target of the reason why they're calling.
Yeah.
And again, it's great courage that is needed.
Yes.
And you know, having said that, quite often we feel, well, you know, we are in a privileged position. A lot of occasions occur when somebody will call you and say, actually, I've never in all my life told anybody about this or been able to discuss this particular aspect. And you think, well, you've provided a forum for that to happen.
Yes.
And what a privilege it is that this person has got the courage, if you like, to unburden themselves with this. And, you know, the old adage, a trouble shared is a trouble halved, you know. And I think that still works, certainly. You know, if you're opening up and talking things through, you're not going to be able to provide them with an answer. But I think a lot of my colleagues will say, at the end of a caller will say to you, "Oh, thank you so much for listening, and thank you for all the advice you've given."
Oh, that's nice.
And you've given no advice at all.
Oh, okay, right.
Because it's come from them.
Yeah.
You've steered them maybe in different directions to explore a particular way through a situation.
Yes.
They've decided in their own mind what to do.
Yeah.
You haven't suggested anything, in fact. You've just guided them and given an opportunity for them to open up and explore the options.
And planted a seed, maybe.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. You know, we're not problem solvers.
Yes.
But it's just giving that person time and space, which is so rare these days.
Yes, yeah.
We live in such an intense world.
Yes.
Bombarded by information, 24 hours a day almost, aren't we?
Yeah, we are.
And to just have that peace and opportunity of exploring is so valuable. It really is.
Do you ever get what you believe may be prank calls? That's hard. I guess that's hard to. If you think, "Oh, what if this person's serious?" But maybe the story can sound quite extreme, or maybe
yes,
someone trying to see how much they can get away with.
Yes, I think it's absolutely right. We do. I think being a national number, being a free phone number, of course, we do get a whole variety of strange calls, shall we say, putting it in its general context. We have people who phone regularly. That's fine. We do have regular
that's allowed,
callers, and that is absolutely fine. We don't keep a tally, so-and-so's called 16 times during this week.
Yeah.
Having said that, yes, we do get odd calls which are inappropriate, shall I say. I won't take that any further, but we do get inappropriate calls. And there are ways of ending them and politely saying, we're not here for this particular reason.
Yes.
And quite often the caller will hang up, or the question could be asked, "And how can Samaritans help you with this?"
Okay.
And then the call will end.
Yeah, so there's ways of.
Oh, there are ways of.
Without...
And yes, they do happen. With any free phone number, there's always abuse of the system. Yeah. And so, hard as it might be for new Samaritans when they first come on, they are made aware that this does happen. And of course the training takes that into account.
Yeah.
It does happen. There's no getting away from it.
What would happen? It'd be an interesting scenario if, say, a caller took a call from someone. I thought, "Hey, I recognise this voice," and it's a family member or something. Does that ever happen? That must be.
Well, that is difficult. Yes,
that
that's an interesting scenario because I suppose one of the most difficult ones, I suppose, if you're doing a face-to-face and somebody comes into the centre who you know.
Oh, right. Oops.
And they recognise you and say, "Oh, gosh, what are you doing here?"
Yeah.
You can give them the option because you never work alone. You can say to them, "Well, look, if you want to talk to somebody else, that is absolutely fine for me. I'll get my colleague to come forward."
Yeah.
So there is a way around that.
Oh, that's good.
A lot of people don't retain their names, their proper names, when they become a Samaritan. They will change them.
That's a good idea.
So Fred might become John, or Jack might become Graham or whatever. And so again, to preserve the anonymity. But yes, there are occasions where you pick up the phone and you think, "Actually, I do know that voice. I recognise that voice." But you carry on.
Yeah. You do. You can carry on.
Carry on.
Yeah, I guess that's.
I think it's fair to say that if the caller does challenge and say, "Well, are you so and so?" I think you've got to come clean and say, "Well, look, would you like to, therefore, speak to another colleague?"
Yes.
If it is a confidential matter and you don't want me to know anything about it, then that's absolutely fine.
Yeah.
You can understand that scenario. But yes, that does occur, but it's very, very rare. It has happened to me once.
Oh, hasn't it? Yes.
Yes. And I managed to get through the call without any problem at all.
Oh, that's good. That's really, it mustn't sort of take you, but you change your voice then.
Yes, that's right. No. I carried on, but I don't think the person knew it was me. I knew who the caller was, though.
Oh,
but,
right.
But it went no further, of course, because of the confidential nature of our organisation. Absolutely right, yes. But it does happen.
Yeah, I bet it does. My goodness. In the event, I guess it must be quite difficult if someone calls, inquiring after the caller. I hope you don't mind me calling, but I think my son may have called. He's showing signs of distress. He won't talk to me. Can you please tell me what this is? Because as a parent, it's torturing me. That must be difficult. Do you have something like that? It is,
yes. We do. We have people who sometimes bring in a teenager.
All right.
Teenagers going through problems. Mother or father may bring them in.
Yeah.
And we make it quite clear that we will see their child on their own, without the parent being present.
Right.
And so we will take them into another room, the parent, give them a cup of tea, settle them down with a biscuit or whatever, and then we will talk to the child. And we make it quite clear to the parent or guardian, we cannot discuss the nature of the call, the outcome, or the conversation that we've had here. It is entirely confidential, and that is how we operate, and I'm very sorry. Distressing as it might be, we cannot disclose any information at all.
It's fair enough, isn't it? There's no other way.
It is. And having said that, it you can see it from the point of view of the parent. Of course you can. They want to know what the cause of the upset is or the distress so that they can rectify it. And we cannot give them any information. Nothing that's been disclosed to us ever goes any further.
Yeah, of course.
And that is a hard call, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, that must be hard.
Yeah.
And even worse than that, I guess, if someone has taken their life and someone phones asking, did so-and-so phone you just before that? Yeah, this happened. We don't know why they took their life. Can the rule break then, or is it still absolutely?
No, it's still like that.
Yeah.
Yes,
because that would be betrayal, I guess, wouldn't it? Really?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you're thinking about what were the final words, or what was said in the last few hours, or what happened. You cannot disclose anything like that at all. It's got to remain within the organisation, and that is terribly hard. That doesn't happen very often, but it has happened.
Oh, it has?
Oh, yes, it has happened.
Yeah.
But you cannot say any more than that. And
was it an angry approach?
Yes, but you can't really disclose whether the that person who took their own life in your particular scenario has actually made contact with us. We don't even disclose that.
Yes, of course.
So we wouldn't be able to say, yes, they have contacted us. We wouldn't say anything like that at all.
Yeah.
Because again, the person who phones, that is just between them and us.
Yes,
and
of
no
course.
outside agency, friend, relative, whatever you like to call them.
And you still would have promised that person while they were alive, and I guess you're still got to respect that.
Well, that's the basis on which they phone us. They know that it's a confidential line, that nothing will be shared.
Yeah.
And that is the end of the story. Now, I just want to quickly qualify that, if I may, because one of the things that has been brought in very recently is safeguarding.
Oh, right.
Now, this again is a bit of a sensitive issue, but you can understand why it's in place, and that is if you have a child or a vulnerable adult on the end of the phone who is in a difficult situation, maybe a life-threatening situation.
Yes.
You make quite clear to the caller, if you have sufficient information about that caller, that is that they've given their name, they've given their telephone number, we would say to them, look, we believe you are in a vulnerable situation, we may have to take this further.
Sure.
And translate the information that we have to an organisation that can come to your aid.
Yes.
And you make that quite clear to them. Now, at that point, they've got two options. They can either continue in conversation with us, or they can end the call. If they don't want it to go any further, they have the option of ending it.
Yeah.
Now, those situations, again, are few and far between.
Right.
But I think it's fair to say this is a movement in the right direction, obviously. Safeguarding is a big thing in this country now, and as I'm sure it is globally. And that if you have somebody in a vulnerable position, and you feel that outside help is needed, the volunteer doesn't make that decision themselves. They would consult others.
Yes.
But they would make it quite clear to the caller if they sense that they are in danger. Then they would say to the caller, look, I'm going to have to take this further.
Yes. Yeah.
You've given me sufficient information so far. Would you be prepared to tell me your location or whatever so that we can actually get to you to give you assistance? That's
very good, yeah.
I think it's essential, really.
Yeah, it is, yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, if you think of a worst case scenario, a child being abused at home or wherever, and it's ongoing and they just cannot see a way out, it may be that would be the option.
Yeah.
To actually allow that caller to get another level of support and help brought to them.
Sure.
So we do offer that, certainly.
That is very good.
Those situations, I must admit, Deborah, are quite few and far between, but that policy is in place, and you'll find that is in place for all charitable and other organisations as well.
That's very good. Safety of the actual Samaritan regarding visitors. So you have visitors into the centre.
Yes.
In the event that someone should get violent, is there some safety for the actual Samaritan?
Yeah, I mean, the well-being of volunteers is absolutely tantamount to the success of our organisation, I would say. And one of the things, I mean, talking from the perspective of our particular organisation, our branch in Portsmouth, as I said to you earlier, we have a face-to-face situation where people can come in off the street without an appointment and speak to us. Now, their conversation is confidential, so we sit in a room together. It is fair to say that there is CCTV within the building and within those rooms.
Brilliant, that's good.
Notices are up, so whoever arrives will see those and they are made aware of that.
Yeah.
But there is no sound transmission, so in other words, our conversation is simply between the two of us.
Sure.
The CCTV is linked to what we call the operations room, where my co-volunteer, shall we say, is working. They have a screen where they can see the caller who's come in.
Good. Yeah.
They can see the back of my head, which is always an interesting picture, as you can imagine. And they can pick up an awful lot from body language, what is going on. If somebody comes in to talk to us, I'd ask my co-volunteer to come and knock on the door.
Oh, yeah.
So after 15 minutes and say, is everything all right?
That's a good idea.
That's fine. To answer your original question, if somebody comes in or arrives on the door in a, should we say, a drunken state,
oh yes, you must have
we may suggest to them, look, would you like to just sort of go away for a little while, sort of compose yourself in the politest way as you can understand,
yes. Yeah.
And then either come back to us or phone us. And we don't have to let people into the centre. Everybody who arrives on our doorstep, we're not automatically obliged to bring them in.
No.
But having said that, if people are going to get violent, or we suspect that there's going to be a little bit of danger, shall we say, to use an extreme word for the co-volunteer, we do wear a system where we can call for assistance.
Oh, that's good.
So we have a sort of personal alarm, you would call it.
Yeah.
Which we would wear discreetly, so that if there is a problem, we can summon assistance. But the very fact that we've got, a CCTV coverage, then the co-volunteer can see exactly what we're doing.
Yeah, and it's good for the visitor as well, because it may make them think twice before.
Well, absolutely, it works two ways. Their safety and well-being, and ours as well. But yes, I mean that would be the only technical situation where you're physically alone with somebody.
Yes.
Because of the confidentiality of the conversation. The only exception to that would be if a child comes into the centre.
Oh, right, okay.
Then the policy is we would have two volunteers together.
Oh, you would? Yes, of course, because it's... I was going to ask you about that. What happens if someone's like absolutely distraught and they just want a hug? Are you allowed to have physical contact? You're not allowed to have physical contact?
No. We can't get up and give them a hug. No.
No.
No. Nothing like that at all. I mean, some people shake their hands as they go out. which is fair enough. But no embracing or anything like that. It is that's a bit of a
very difficult, isn't it? It must feel tempting sometimes. Oh, I just want to give them.
Well, it is, but it's their space, and you don't really want to invade it. And people don't like that sometimes.
That's what we assume, just because we may be that way. That we. Do you ever have? It may sound a silly question, but do you ever have callers that are just very, very funny, and you're really stifling a laugh, and they're just naturally funny, even though they may be speaking about something quite serious? It's quite hard to...
I think that happens on the odd occasion where you've got somebody who's particularly nervous, maybe the case, and as a form of sort of a crutch to help them through, maybe a little bit of humour is injected from their part. I think the response from a volunteer would be measured, shall we say. We would allow them to use that vehicle, if you like, for communication up to a point. But I think more often than not, if that happens, you find that would fall by the wayside once the real crux of the conversation comes through. It may be a way of starting a conversation from a caller's point of view, if they're particularly nervous or whatever. And that might well be the case. But I think, at this point, we've spent a lot of time, touching on suicide and that sort of thing. I think it's only fair to say, to try and redress the balance, that, a lot of our calls come from people who have mental illness. And there are a lot of people who aren't, wanting our support in that respect. And, those of, if you like, who've got employment problems or relationship problems, that sort of thing. So you don't have to be suicidal to phone the Samaritans. And I think, that's almost one of our slogans on one of our cards, I think,
that rings
we're here for all emotional support that we can offer right across the full spectrum. So that's how we operate, and I think it's important to sort of try and get us through on that one.
That's great. No, it's been interesting to talk about this and be so informed, and it's just such a great organisation, because 24/7 you don't often get many.
No.
In fact, it's not. No. It's a helpline, but it's an actual hearing line.
That's right.
I can't think of any other.
That's right.
Certainly here in Britain.
Yes.
24/7 that you can just call.
The phone system is quite an ingenious one in many ways. That I think it's fair to say that there's no single centre or branch that is going to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You find it physically impossible because of the numbers of volunteers that you might have. But having said that, dialing our free phone number will take you through to a volunteer within the UK who is available.
That's good.
So I think it works two ways, really. It means that when you pick the phone up and dial our number, you could go anywhere, the call could go anywhere in the country. You will always get that same response from a volunteer, because we're all trained in exactly the same way. Our programme is identical. So you're not going to get better service in Wales or Scotland or wherever it might
just
be.
Just an accent.
Absolutely. But having said that, it means therefore that the call is answered immediately. There may be the rare occasion where lines are, all full. In which case, there'll be a slight delay before a volunteer will be able to take that call. But on the other hand, I feel personally there's a slight downside insofar that local callers that we used to have before we had this free phone number relied on our branch regularly. And you knew the people who would call in. You had a rapport with them almost. And that, I suppose, in a way, has dissipated. Not only our branch, but I'm sure that's a national problem as well. And so this brings me back to why we feel outreach is very important to keep the flag waving within our local community, that we are still here. So it's not just giving out cards at stations or taking street collections or anything like that. It's just showing a presence. You know,
That's
there
great.
we are with our little tabards on,
Yeah.
handing out cards, whatever it might be. And, you know, the word Samaritans, if you like, sinks into the subconscious.
Yes, of course.
And it's there.
Well, it's all,
you
yes.
know, and that's, you know, worth remembering. But, I mean, the calls, just to give you some idea, because we haven't spoken about statistics or anything, have we? And I'm not going to bore you with those.
Sorry.
But
No, it's-
to give you an idea, nationally, to the end of May, the number of calls that were answered were 59,000, just over.
Wow.
And the calls answered, sorry, I beg your pardon, that's slightly wrong, that's just for a week.
Yes.
From the beginning of this year till the end of May, it was 1.3 million. So there is a need, you might say, you know, for us to be about.
Yeah,
There really
absolutely.
is. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I mean, is there anything you would like to... So the actual website, so for our US listeners, if they might need to speak, so there's a website for... is it still? Can they still get in touch with Samaritans, or would it be the...
It would be within their particular country.
Yeah.
Befriend Us Worldwide.
Befriend Us Worldwide.
Worldwide would be the organisation, which is really an extension of the Samaritans. This was set up by Chad, as I said, you know, right at the beginning. So that would be for them.
Yeah.
The text messages, we do take those from the United States. Certainly, there's absolutely no problem with that at all. Again, found on our website, you'll find it as a text message address that they could use on there.
That's wonderful.
But you know, we receive anybody and everything.
That's wonderful. Well, it's been great to chat with you, Chris. Thank you
Not
so
at
much
all.
for coming
Not
on
at
the
all.
show and
Not at
for
all.
the work you do and the lives that you would have saved.
Yeah. Well, that's very
It's
kind.
been a great blessing. That's wonderful.
Thank you very much.
And thanks for tuning in, folks, and great to be with you again. Till next time, lots of love and stay blessed.